Yes. Lady Hooper, I have around half a dozen questions that have been put forward by core participants for your consideration. The first is to ask what knowledge you had during your time as a Minister in the Department of Health of how hospitals, haemophilia centres and general practitioners obtained blood products.
Well, I know now from looking at the papers that the voluntary contributions that were made in by blood donors in the UK were not sufficient, and therefore that we had to import blood, hence this particular problem. But I understand that we imported blood from not only the United States, but from other places as well. But I can't remember much about it.
I won't push you any further then, but just to, you say imported blood. Do you mean imported blood products as opposed to importing whole blood during your time as Minister? If you're not sure.
I'm sorry.
Second question, I'm afraid it's an unrelated topic, so we'll jump around a little. Were you aware, again during your time as a Minister in the Department of Health, of prosecutions that were brought in France of doctors who were involved in the supply of blood and blood products in France?
I don't think I was aware at the time, but it has been mentioned to me recently in the light of this inquiry.
Third question, and this goes back to the discussion we had about the purposes of putting a submission up to a minister and having decisions made by ministers. I've been asked to suggest that, or to seek your views on whether another purpose of bringing a submission to a minister's attention is to ensure that that minister is able to give accurate information as part of his or her ministerial responsibilities.
Yes, I mean, I would have thought that went almost without saying, because certainly submissions came forward if I had to answer a question or other things. So, one assumed that information was correct. One had to assume that you couldn't.
When you say answer a question, do you mean in Parliament?
In a parliamentary question in Parliament. Yes. Yes.
The next question concerns the extent to which the Scottish office in particular, but also the Welsh office and the Northern Ireland office, were kept abreast of matters in relation to the decision that was taken on hepatitis C screening. If we could have on screen PRSE 304667. This is the submission that went to you on the 21st of December 1990, seeking a decision on the introduction of hepatitis C screening. And of course your decision was that you agreed with the recommendation that such screening should be introduced. If we can look at paragraph 2, please. We read this out earlier. It is recommended that screening should be introduced as a public health measure. The other UK health ministers are also being asked to approve the introduction of screening in their transfusion services. You said earlier that that indicated that the Scottish office, the Northern Ireland office, the Welsh office were having similar submissions that were put to them. Do you recall if you had any discussions yourself with ministers in those departments on this issue?
I don't remember for sure, but I don't think I had any meetings with the territorial departments, no. And I have a feeling that the Scottish people went in for screening slightly earlier than we did anyway, but I may be misremembering.
If there had been a major source of contention or a dispute that couldn't be resolved by the officials, would it be escalated up to ministerial level if that was felt necessary?
I would have thought so, yes.
But to the best of your recollection, there was no such dispute?
I don't remember it ever happening, no.
Final topic is to do with the Council of Europe.
Oh, yes.
We discussed earlier Kenneth Clarke's view and your experience of that body as well. Is it the case that Council of Europe recommendations would have been considered if they touched upon health within the Department of Health, regardless of whether they were to be implemented? Would they at least have been considered?
I feel sure they would have been received by the relevant department. I'm not quite sure by whom. And I have actually no recollection of it being mentioned to me, that any reference to the Council of Europe recommendations being mentioned to me.
It may follow that you're unable to help on the final question then. If a recommendation had been received and considered by the department, are you able to express a view on why it might be that that recommendation would not then be implemented?
I think simply because it was a recommendation and we were not obliged to make a decision. Yes, I can't really help you on that, I'm afraid.
So that we are clear, you cannot remember a recommendation touching upon matters with which you were concerned as a departmental minister in health ever being brought to your attention from a Council of Europe?
Any involvement I had with Europe was with the, as it I think still was then, the EEC, as opposed to what it is now, the European Union. I don't recollect anything cropping up, even in terms of debates or anything in the House of Lords, because it's the sort of issue that is a bit of a House of Lords issue. The House of Lords is quite fond of the Council of Europe because it has representatives on the delegation to the Parliamentary Assembly. So I actually have no recollection of it being raised, certainly not in this context.
Those are the questions that we have from the call participants. I'll just turn now to your own legal advisors. Nothing from them, sir?
I have no questions of my own.
Lady Hooper, as with all of our witnesses, there is now an opportunity for you to add anything that you wish to add, if you choose to do so.
Well, I think that I'd just sort of like to say a few closing remarks in the hope and to hope that the outcome of this inquiry and the recommendations that will come through eventually will help all those who've suffered, and that it will also cause a real improvement in connection with patient safety generally, which has to be a priority for the National Health Service in its delivery to the highest possible standards. So that I'd also like to thank everybody who's been involved in the team in preparing me for this, but also the courtesy and kindness that's been shown in the course of today's hearing, which actually made it far less frightening than I'd anticipated. And perhaps a final word to the core participants who are here, but also to all those who have suffered, and to reiterate my sympathy and the hope that no such tragedy will ever occur again.
Well,
So thank you all.
Sorry. Had you finished?
Yes, thank you.
I'd like to thank you in turn, not just for those remarks, although your reference to courtesy, I think you'll have understood from the way you have been received in this room, and the way in which, on the whole, all our witnesses have been received, is that those who come to this inquiry come because they want to know, and they want to hear what each witness in turn has to say, and we do our best to ensure that each witness is comfortable in saying whatever it is they have to say, however uncomfortable sometimes it may be for people to listen to it. Your evidence, it's been a challenge, I think, to remember back over 30 years to what were a couple of years in a very busy ministerial life. Can I thank you for your understanding in dealing with that as you have, and helping to add to the picture which we all have. And I see people are nodding at that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Tuesday,
Next week.
Lord Waldegrave.
Lord Waldegrave, next Tuesday, 10 o'clock.